second. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for a literary event for South Asian Heritage Month as part of the LIT programme. My name is Natasha Janejo, and I'm literary lead at South Asian Heritage Month and founder of South Asian Writers. We are very lucky to be joined today by Nikesh Shukla and Nida Manzoor and Nikita Gill and Coco Khan for this very, very special craft conversation for writers. You are in for a treat. I'm going to leave you in Nikesh's very, very capable hands. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Natasha. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this. It feels really strange to go back to Zoom events, having done a couple in person. But hey, guys, how's it going?
Hi.
Good. Yeah. So, like normally I'd be addressing the audience at this bit, but I feel like I'm just telling you what about the panel that you already know that you're doing. Thank you so much to those of you joining us. Basically, what I wanted to do for South Asian Heritage Month as the literature patron is put on a conversation for writers by writers. So I've asked 3 writers who are doing very, very different things, but we all have one thing in common. We all tell stories, to basically talk about the commonality between the ways that we tell stories and also the differences, in the hope that we can learn more about our craft, but also hopefully impart some knowledge onto you guys. The main thing to say is that the literature program is free, and I've asked these guys to do an event for free, which is, in pandemic times, like, amazed that they were able to say yes. So all I ask is that you buy their stuff and you watch their stuff and you shout about their stuff on the internet. That would be amazing. Thank you. So just to introduce our panel, I've got 3 of my favorite people in the world. First up, we've got Nikita Gill, who over lockdown became like a little sister to me because we ran a writing clinic over Instagram, and I just love her so much. She is the author of 4 poetry books, including the novel in verse, The Girl and the Goddess, which is just an incredible book. She also edited a collection of poems called Slam. We also have Coco Khan, another one of my favorite people. She is a Guardian journalist and essayist and broadcaster and amazing person, and also original The Good Immigrant fam. So Coco, I met when I asked her if she'd contribute to The Good Immigrant, and she quickly became just one of my favorite people in the world. And actually, before lockdown, yours was the last hangout I had, was going to see you for your birthday. And finally, we have the incredible Nida Manzoor. Nida Manzoor is the creator, the director, the writer of everyone's favorite sitcom at the moment, We Are Lady Parts, which I'm a huge fan of, from the comedy blap all the way through to the series that the season 1 that just dropped on Channel 4 and on Peacock, if you're watching this from the States. Nida also has written and directed for loads and loads of other places before, most notably my other favorite sitcom, Enterprise, which I think is one of the best sitcoms about London that's ever been made. So welcome to all of you. How are you all doing? Coco, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Nikesh. I am very tired because you'll all be surprised to know that news never stops. And I never stop. And so, yes, but I'm good. I'm really glad to be here. I'm glad this event is happening as well. When you first asked me, do you want to do this thing for South Asian Heritage Month? I confess there was a little part of me that was like, oh, God, it's just going to be people sending me questions being like, but are you married? But then I'm really glad that immediately, just in 10 seconds, I've known that I was completely wrong. And I'm really glad to be here and bigging up the crew and bigging up our communities. So yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Coco. How are you, Nida?
I'm really well, thanks, Nikesh. What am I doing? Lady Parts came out, did all the press, which was all fun and exciting. And now I'm just kind of figuring out my next move. But I've been writing a film and hoping to make that. So that's been basically what I've been doing with my days and just wandering around.
Let's just get it out of the way now, because people will want to know. And season 2?
Season 2, we're still waiting for a official sign off on whether or not we'll get a season 2, but fingers crossed.
Really, really hope it happens. It needs to happen for the culture. And Nikita, how are you?
I'm good. I've taken a break from social media, which has been the best thing I could have done for my brain. And I actually went to watch Kate Tempest's Paradise a couple of days ago. I'm talking about it to everyone because it is so so good. It's Sophocles retelling, and everyone should go watch it. It is a fully woman and non-binary cast. Just please go watch it. It's so good.
Oh, amazing. Great. So let's get to the craft chat. So please use the comments to ask questions. I've got a stream of them here. All I would ask is that the questions be actual questions and not comments. And questions usually have question marks at the end of them. And also try and make them ones that we can all answer. If we just get 3,000 questions about which guitars were used in Lady Parts, then I'll feel bad for Coco and Nikita. But you know, just take screen grabs of Lady Parts and like zoom in. But yeah, like just basically, sorry, that was a really awkward way of just saying make sure your questions are quite like aimed at all of us. This is a problem of like going back to Zoom and like doing it and all I can see is your faces. Like I'm just in the mood to chat to my mates. So but the first question I wanted to ask, we all tell stories and we all have a voice, right? And the reason we tell stories and the types of stories we want to tell is something that is so individualized, and also our voice is so unique to us. And so I want to spend a bit of time talking about what type of stories you really feel compelled to tell, and also I want to spend a bit of time talking about how you built your voice. So I'm just going to throw that out as a starter question. What are the types of stories that really attract you? We'll start with you, Nikita, because like two of your poetry books have been based in like different myths and mythology, and so you seem really rooted in like taking ancient stories and myths and updating them, but also your work is so much more than that. I wonder if you could just tell us about the types of stories you love telling.
Oh, absolutely. I think growing up in India, knowing that you're queer and you're brown and you're a woman, all of those three things are really loaded, right? But I think the thing that I found really hard to deal with was basically my sexuality, because a lot of what I was feeling was basically, you know, if I ever discussed it with anyone, was basically like, you over there, however you're feeling, just stop feeling it, right? So I wanted to write stories for queer brown girls and queer brown people, really, because I feel like I didn't have any stories like that growing up. And you know, a lot of my work deals with retelling these ancient goddesses and ancient women in a new form. And I feel like there's something really empowering in that, and being able to take those stories and retelling them for ourselves, because all of the ancient stories, the main people who wrote them were male poets or male writers. So the women came across very, to at least me and a lot of other women, they came across as very two-dimensional. You know, they were either pretty and petty, or they were mean and pretty, or they were just there was, the prettiness was essential, and then there was like the nasty adjective alongside it. So I felt, and the women who kind of were portrayed as good women were they were kind of almost passive. So I felt like it was really important to kind of reclaim these stories, and with this really radical idea that women are people, you know, and kind of portraying them that way. So
thank you so much. And Nida, like, so a lot of your work is rooted in comedy, and having known you for a while and sort of spoken to you about these sorts of traditions, you kind of I love how your humor is, your sense of humor, especially in your writing, is so character focused and so human, but it also has this really lovely sense of the absurd. And I wondered if you could talk about some of the stories that you that really you know what I'm trying to say. I forgot the word.
Oh no, thank you so much for saying that, Nikesh. Yeah, you know, actually similarly to Nikita, there were certain things that I was watching, especially as a teen, that had this sort of sense of playfulness and fun. I remember loving like Back to the Future, or, you know, even just sort of weird American indie films like Igby Goes Down, and there's again like really interesting films and fun films that really, but where it was sort of a white male lead getting to do all this interesting stuff. So again, I was quite excited to write something where I could kind of pour in the things I felt and the things I feel like I am. Like awkwardness is also something I really love to explore. You know, I love comedy, so I really wanted to just kind of lean into that space, but sort of fill it with, you know, people I know and I love, and that was actually just so cathartic to do, and just the best thing ever, to kind of to really step into my own voice, I suppose, and kind of and own it. And like the more I did that, the more kind of confident I felt, like the kind of I felt I could be more absurd and more playful, and sort of things that I've seen in films I love that do that, I could kind of sort of, you know, riff on that and but go further. And so it's almost like the sort of first steps going in as I was doing it kind of allowed me to just even keep going. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Thank you. And Coco, I guess for you, you know, given that a large part of what you do is being a journalist, like you're often looking at the news, but you're also looking at your own life and looking at things that are happening in the culture, and you're thinking, where's the story in this? Where's the angle in this? And often that's, you know, that's comes from your sense of what you think makes a story, like what your particular angle is or what your worldview is. Can you talk a bit about that, please?
Yeah, so I think that the idea of voice in journalism is something that's not covered very much, but I think it is integral. Obviously, if you're a news reporter, I'm not a news reporter for anyone watching. I do features, so it's more like long form stuff. But if you're a news reporter, obviously you have to go out and, like, you know, this happened, so-and-so, whatever, fell on a banana skin. And you have to do that when you're a feature writer as well. But the idea of voice is very, very important, because you have to take people on this long journey. They have to want to read it, like trying to get people to, all of us have to make sure that we get people to read it to the end. And like that can be such a big challenge, and voice is really, really integral to that. So one of the things that, to answer the question about, you know, the sort of stuff that I like and how it impacted me, I've always been really, really into this kind of, it's quite American. It's an American form of journalism, which is very much like the journalist as sometimes the centerpiece. Now, that sounds really egotistical and kind of in antithesis to our times. Like, we don't need to hear about columnists putting themselves at the center of things again. Like, I mean, the world is worse for columnists. However, I think that when you're doing it as a marginal writer, a brown writer, a woman, from, you know, whatever background it is, I do think there is value in doing that. And so actually that collision of journalism and putting myself into it is the kind of through theme of both how I approach my features, but also any of the creative writing that I do on the side. It is that. So it's that kind of very American style of stuff. I'm trying to think of who's really good at that. I mean, the famous writers are obviously the ones that were in Playboy in the 60s. It was so annoying that they were in Playboy in the 60s. Why do you have to be in Playboy? It just makes it very frustrating. But they had some very great writing in there. Titties and great writing. That was what it was. It's such a shame, isn't it? There's so many so good in that. Those magazines. Go on, sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, the birth of that was probably that really famous long form essay, Mr. Sinatra Has a Cold, where someone I think it may have even been for Playboy, but the author is tasked with going to interview Frank Sinatra during a Vegas run, and he can't get an audience with Frank Sinatra because Mr. Sinatra has a cold, he's constantly told. And so he ends up talking to absolutely everyone else around him in his circle and builds up this picture, but also, like, he becomes the story. His search for Sinatra becomes the story. But then the other thing that you said, I think that is really interesting, and I think it's worth highlighting, because I think it does affect my work and Nikita's work and Nida's work as well, is when we widen, when we increase the types of lens through which we see the world, we get different types of stories, we get different specificities. And I think that's something so ingrained in your work, Coco, because, like, you know, I'm not saying, like, you know, like when articles lead with as a X, Y, and Z identity, I am going to tell you about this, but actually, you know, being the journalist present in the story and being who you are automatically casts a new light on what you're covering. Right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And when we talk a lot about, like, you know, the different experiences of people, and the intersection of those experiences, not sometimes they're just down to individual things, obviously, but, like, you know, your race, your gender, your sexuality, it does change how you experience the world, and especially when you're doing stuff in a factual manner. I think there's even more reason to put different voices in there, because this is the stuff of record, and it is important to see that if you're a brown woman doing a piece about traveling through Spain solo, it just is a different experience to Tom. And I think actually putting yourself in the center of that, it's a weird thing to say, but when you think about journalism, but I think it's really valuable. And it's something that I do. And hey, I'm still employed. So it can't be that bad.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like I can't tell the audience watching, I can't tell you how revolutionary it was, and yet I was troubled by how revolutionary it was when the first draft of Coco's essay Flags arrived in my inbox, and I was like, we've never read anything like this. And then I immediately thought, but why haven't we read anything like this? Nida, can you talk a little bit about that lens and, like, you know, you talked about the specificity of being an awkward teenager and you know, obviously the environment that you grew up into and how that affects how you view comedy.
That's so interesting. I grew up in a household where comedy was like the thing. You know, my parents were both very funny people, and they both loved comedy and the arts. So it was always at home and around. And part of it was like, it was so important in the house. Like it felt important to me, and going out and yeah, it's interesting. You know, you talk about it as a lens. I really do feel it's sort of in kind of slightly intrinsic to who I am as an artist, especially when I was taking meetings earlier as a neurowriter, when I was sort of being asked to, you know, when you're asked to explore what it means to be a Muslim woman, oftentimes they want a sort of very intense or sad drama about the kind of, you know, the darkness and the torment, and you know, this is the dominant narrative. And I just remember being confronted with my comediness when I was like, I'm a comedy writer, but like you know, and so part of the reason, like, some of the music came from like wanting to, why can't I look at the joy of what it means to be a brown woman, a Muslim woman, but also the darkness, but also kind of comedy still be this main kind of ship driving that. That's because I kind of, it's just the most fun thing to do. And I suppose that's it. It's like when you sit down at the page as a writer, it's like, what's the thing that's the most exciting? And for me, it's, you know, finding is comedy, but it's also comedy where it kind of will move tones. And when do you move into a more dramatic tone? And how do you move back? And how do you mix the genres? Like that for me is the sort of, that gets me excited when I sit down. And that's the sort of thing that kind of I've been sort of following now as I kind of move on in my career.
Yeah, and what I love as well is one of the choices that you made for We Are Lady Parts was that you made the parents be super supportive of their kids' endeavors, which was amazing. But also, like, why is it amazing? Which I thought, you know, like, again, it was the same thing as like when I first read Flags, I was like, this is revolution. Why do I feel this is and I guess that's the sort of burden of like being the only one sometimes. Nikita, tell us about the types of stories that you are really drawn to, and also where your voice figures in this, because I think when you are taking, you know, when you're remixing, updating, diving deep into these ancient myths, they always feel like they are very much your work, like you have approached the page, and I wondered how you find your voice in these retellings.
I think a lot of the stories I write, like I said before, is, you know, to a version of my younger self who wasn't understanding these stories, who kind of had all of these questions, because these stories have lasted through time for a reason, and it's because they represent a lot of like archetypes in our society still. And it's really interesting because now that I've looking into Hindu mythology with a lot more depth, and I've been looking into Greek mythology with a lot more depth, there are these like differences which I find really interesting, where the Greek gods are openly, you know, kind of petty, and they are angry and they're jealous, and they represent the very worst which we see in ourselves, but they're gods. So they have these powers which could essentially decimate planets, right? Whereas with Hindu mythology, I kind of find that the stories always have a moral. There's a lesson. Even the gods are not above learning lessons. And I think there's something really beautiful about that. These mythological figures who, you know, are omniscient and celestial and have the power to, you know, reset universes and rebuild universes, still have things to learn. And I think that's something really powerful and beautiful. So when you're digging through, when I feel like I'm digging through these stories, what I take from these stories are the things that really speak to me, which I feel like, oh, there's poetry in that there's a lesson in that, but that lesson is so poetic. I can't help but take it and rewrite it and retell it in a way which is poetic, which is modern. So I kind of find my voice within the research of what I'm looking at. And sometimes it's such a minor character that they're there for about 5 seconds in the story of like this major god, and then they disappear. And I'm like, but wait, there's more to that story. Let's pull it back. Let's see what happens if you expose it and retell it.
Great, thank you. So the thing I wanted to talk about now was how we construct character. Because I think from, obviously everything that we're all doing, be it the characters who appear in those long form pieces, whether they are the journalist as character or the people that you are documenting or writing about, through to your very ensemble cast, Nida, through to people and gods that we feel like we have an awareness of, and also part of what you're doing is giving them some sort of giving them a depth that they haven't necessarily been afforded before, or even like the characters in The Girl and the Goddess. What work do you do around character construction? Like, where do you start? Do you start with like a feeling, or do you start with a moment, or do you think of story first or character, or do the characters appear to you? Shall we? I mean, I guess Coco, we'll start with you. I guess for you, like the character's already there because
yeah. Well, if it's in a journalism format, then you have to sort of tell the truth, right?
Yeah.
Even there is a kind of like, especially when you're, and I think all of us will have that kind of burden of responsibility, whether it's in a newspaper. Obviously, if it's in a newspaper, it's read by, you put one word in there about their character, I don't know, perhaps you'll say they're garrulous, that could really destroy their lives. They could really be upset by it, and you have that weight of like responsibility. Like, if someone was a shitty person, you sort of want to say they were. It's important. If you're interviewing a celebrity and they're very nasty and cruel and they treat you very badly, it is an insight into them, and you do want to say it. But then there's also that other thing. I think all of us have that burden as well, whether it's putting it into a novel, a book of poems, or a TV show, especially when you're the only one. Like, everything you do, you feel responsible for. It's maybe more obvious when it's journalism because you have to tell the truth, but even in the creative space, I think we all have to do that. Anyway, to return to your question about character, in the journal, you just have to tell the truth, right? And obviously you can amp it up so it's more entertaining to read or whatever, or tone it down or whatever you need to do, but it has to be the truth. With the creative writing stuff,
sorry, can I just ask, sorry to interrupt, can I just ask a question about that? Because like truth in that instance, truth can be quite subjective. No, you're right, you're writing the truth of your experience of this person. And so like the details you choose to put on the page, or the details that, and even then they have to then be run through various editors and stuff. So how do you pick apart what goes onto the page that is represented in the experience? Because I think that then does affect how we view that truth.
Absolutely. And I think you're sort of spot on there. Yeah, there's the truth in that they said the words came out of their mouths, but how I interpreted that, which I thought maybe they rushed past it because they were embarrassed, or actually they were really forthright about it. That is, I can say, well, it's quite obvious that they were that. Not really. Someone else could have interpreted another way. And so actually, when going back to that thing about putting yourself into the piece, in many respects, that is more truthful, because everything else is just how you experience, is how you interpreted it anyway. So yeah, you're right. It is much more subjective, and I think probably feeling, that very vague, can't define it. What is feeling? I don't know, but whatever it is, I felt it, and that's why I put it in. That's basically it. Obviously, with the more creative stuff, it's kind of different. You can have more fun with it, but actually, now I'm even saying it out loud. No, it is all just a feeling, isn't it? It's the feeling when you imagine the scene taking place. The feeling that you have, you just describe that thing. And actually, maybe if everyone was more honest about writing their feelings in other types of journalism, we'd probably have a better, more honest media. I felt threatened. Just put that at the top of every article in the Mail. I'm feeling threatened. Let me just be better. Just be honest. Yeah.
But there's that thing that happens where you know, that feeling, that representation of experience, you know, our perspectives, like time does affect our perspective on these things, and we, you know, the more time we spend away from the experience of, say, interviewing someone or being in a story, we start narrating it in our heads, and that can, like Hilary Mantel describes writing historical fiction as it's what's left in the sieve after it's run through the years, which I think is a really, really interesting way of thinking about writing from a position of truth. Like, you know, because our perspective changes, we start telling other people how the experience went, and they might react, and that might then crystallize certain things for us, or highlight things, or make us focus on things. Do you ever find that the more time you spend away from a subject, it's easier to write about or harder to write about?
This is to me, right?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. I don't know what that would be. When would I ever get that time? I mean, you know, in a news situation, no. I would love to be able to answer that, being like, from experience of that 6 months I took to think about that hasn't happened. So I don't know the answer. But when writing about things that have happened in the past that are based on my life, yeah, of course, hindsight, retrospective, time to process, all of those things are valuable. But unfortunately, just my own personal writing career, it's just a luxury I've just never really had. Although, having said that, I think there is also something about like doing things in the moment, the urgency of it. I think there can also be a truth that you can almost like edit out of your own mind when you have too much time to think about what did it really mean. Whereas in the moment you felt like that was bad, that was good. You know, so
yeah, totally. What about you, Nikita? We were talking about character. Sorry, the question got lost about 10 minutes ago as I yammered on.
No, I absolutely love everything Coco said, because sometimes it's true. If you do like sit and think about something too long, you kind of tend to edit it until it becomes something very different. And I all my stories are character led, which is why like I invent the character first. I wrote a poem about how I invent the goddess, so I invent the character first, and then they tell me their story. They tell me what they want me to say, and then I just put pen to paper and make it happen. But it's a really funny one, because when like I think one of the things which I keep saying about poets, about writers in general, is that our job is to sit and like overthink and like then self-edit and then edit again and then edit again, and then what comes out at the end is very different from what you started with. So it's I find that really interesting, the way that a story is written and how much you edit it and where it started and where it goes. So the journey is so fascinating, which is probably another question now I'm answering, but yeah.
You're on mute.
Yeah. Sorry. We had to have at least one of those, right? I love how all three of you at the same time. But I think it's really interesting how all four of us, deal with, or three of you deal with character in different ways. Like, because, you know, with Coco, there is a truth there. With you, there is, you know, that truth is still there. But, you know, there are those flights of imagination that you can do. And you also have more time to reflect and edit. But with Nida, obviously when you conceive of an idea or a show idea, for those people who don't know how it often works, like the script is often the last thing that you do, right? So you spend so much time writing documents about these characters in the abstract, and then you write a script, and then the actors bring the script to life, and then the costume designers get involved, and then the set designers, and so it becomes like a hugely collaborative process, and you as like the auteur in the situation has to retain that essence of character. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about where that starts for you, and also where that ends when you're like all the way in the editing booth.
No, totally. I mean, you're spot on with how you described it. But I think like the starting process with something like We Are Lady Parts was really fun, because I just sort of went away and I developed it on my own, because sometimes you get like a commission to do a pitch doc, but I was like, with this one, I just kind of wanted to do it, to create it on my own and without that sort of company attached just yet, just because I wanted to just, you know, in my quiet space, just figure out what characters really excite me, find images of people who inspire them, and then just really build the characters. And because it's a band show, it's really fun to see where are going to be fun dynamics to play, like where's personality clashes. And because again, like you have a group show, you can have like different kinds of ways of being, which is really fun. And just shaping that initially on my own is one of the most fun things. And then taking that out. I mean, it's interesting with something like comedy. One of the things that you're told, it's like you've got to know what someone is like immediately, like what funny archetype are they. And it's sort of an interesting push-pull when you're working on something where so much of why I want to do it is to show the shades of gray, is to kind of show the kind of complexities of their ways of being. And sometimes there's that like sort of opposed to what comedy is. It's like, boom, in this one line, you'll get what I say. But I think you can kind of do both. And, if you have 6 episodes, you can kind of get into it a bit. But totally, exactly as you said, Nikesh, like, once you cast it, the actors sort of bring a new life. The character gets a sort of reshaped around them. Sometimes I rewrite it as we're doing rehearsals, when you're seeing some really interesting dynamics are coming through, and I can reshape the characters then again. And then in the edit as well, we have another opportunity to kind of really to play with the performances and again, kind of, again, shaping the character. So it feels like for me, it's a constant process from when I kind of conceive of them to, being fully in the edit and sort of cutting the show together.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's funny to hear that like so many sitcom writers like kind of work in the same way. Like I remember talking to Jesse Armstrong about Succession, name drop, but he like that's often the starting point for those episodes is it's the one where X happens, it's the one, and that is very much like the sitcom thing, and it's something that's made fun of through all 9 seasons of Friends, where it's the one where Ross gets a monkey, or it's the one where everyone sees everyone's boobs, or what have you. And the other thing about the characters, the other starting point for characters is like a really great writing exercise that someone told me for character construction, whether you're doing fiction or script stuff, is just to start with a blank sheet of paper and go, he's the type of person who, and then you just keep doing that. He's the type of person who eats crunchy peanut butter. He's the type of person who, and you just keep running through that until you're exhausted. And then you kind of start to have the beginnings of the life of a person, and like it's often like a really weird, all over the place list. Do you guys ever do stuff like that?
Oh, it's so interesting. With Lady Parts, when I was doing the character breakdowns, I did like for each character, I was like, who are their favorite band? How did they meet? Like, why did they get their guitar? Like, it just, again, those sort of trivia questions, like, and what kind of punk are they? Although that's sort of simplifying, but there's some, again, it's sort of adding color and shade, and I totally see the value in that kind of thing.
Nikita, you look like you wanted to come in there.
I just wanted to say, like, I think one of the best exercises I did for both Great Goddesses and The Girl and the Goddess was taking all of those gods and goddesses and putting them in unusual situations, like where you wouldn't expect them. And it was probably one of the most interesting exercises. And I actually ended up making it into Great Goddesses, because I took them all and I put them into 2019 to see what they would do. And it was just, it ended up being such a fun exercise. And there was so much magic in those stories that a lot of people come up to me and say, why did you do that? I'm like, it was a writing exercise. I just had a lot of fun with it. And it became an entire series of short stories of like the Greek gods trying to live as regular human beings, like amongst us. And a lot of them are really funny, because it's just like Ares going, oh, I'm a boxer and I don't know what I'm doing here. But yeah, it's
so like your writing exercises was Zeus needs to get his cracked mobile phone repaired. He goes into a shop.
He goes into a shop and he meets like a woman who just completely disagrees with everything he has to say and fights with him on everything. And I found that really interesting, because the premise of the book really is that gods tend to lose their powers if there aren't people to pray to them. So without the power of prayer, gods are no longer as powerful as they once were, because it's a very fragile ecosystem that makes them who they are. So they kind of still have powers, but they don't have the powers that they used to. So they're still immortal without any of those massive gifts. So what happens? What happens when you're immortal and you're living in 2019, but you don't have your powers anymore? And you kind of have to live like a regular person, and like you can't stand regular people. Like what happens then? Yeah, it was great fun.
Nikki, it sounds like there is like a sitcom idea totally ready to go in that.
Right. Right.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Nikita Gill and Nida Manzoor announced now. Zeus's mobile phone shop.
I have a question. Can I ask a question to Nikita? Thank you. Actually, the run up to this question is, Nida, I interviewed the cast for a story, and they had, unfortunately, I was limited in word count, so I couldn't put all the amazing words they said about you. Like they were so enthused and blown away that you were able to like be open enough to like hear the interpretations, but also have such a strong sense of self that you knew what worked and what didn't work. And I thought a lot about that after I did the interview. I was like, oh, you know, working with others, it's something writers don't often talk about. In screenwriting, it's quite pronounced. In journalism, it's pronounced because you've got 6 editors you've got to deal with and a picture editor. And I wanted to ask Nikita, does any part of your process involve other people? And if not, do you find it lonely? Like, how do you bounce off ideas of yourself?
So I love that question. I do have people that I bounce ideas off, but that's more towards the end of the process, because I've got all of these characters in my head, right? I never feel alone. I wish I was sometimes, but yeah, I have all these characters in my head who are like constantly talking to me and telling me what they want me to write, that it gets quite crowded. It doesn't feel lonely because my stories are so character-led. But at the very end, one of the things that I feel like has been the biggest gift that has ever been given to me is that I have a friend who is my poetry editor, and she's great. Like, what I love about her is that she's wonderful in the sense that she's kind, but she's also brutal. Like, she'll be like, I counted you use this word like 7 times. It's like, you're a poet. You can do better than this. Like, you don't need to use the same word 7 times in like 7 pages. Come on. So it just, I feel like that's a really useful part of the process, but that comes later. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the evolution of your voices now, like, because you're all 3 of you are very established in what you do. You know, we know what a Coco Khan piece is. We know what a Nida Manzoor joint is. We know what a Nikita Gill poem looks like. And I wondered if you could just talk us through that evolution, like, because obviously there's a lot of trying different things and like finding some things that work and some things that don't. And I wondered if there was ever a moment within your journey that you or someone else had a huzzah moment and that kind of changed everything for you. Coco, I wonder if we could just start with you.
Oh God. So what you're talking about, sorry if I was smirking there, it's just I listen to loads of, you know, I like this like American style of journalism where they put themselves into it. So I occasionally listen to American journalists who do this form on podcasts, and what they talk about is the process. You know, it's the process, and what you're asking is what's your process. And I don't know. That's the honest truth. I feel like I should have an answer. Like, I've got no idea. It's so I think maybe ask the others first, and I'll mull on it, and I'll come back to you. But it's honestly something that, like, I don't know. Maybe there is value in saying that not having a process or not knowing what it is yet doesn't eliminate you from producing good work. You can do it. So if there's anyone listening that's like, I don't have a process, then don't worry, I don't either. Maybe you can come to us, but yeah, at the moment I don't know. No.
Oh, I wasn't asking about your process, but, well, here's the thing to mull over. Well, and I'll come to Nida, but here's the thing for Coco Khan to mull over. Knowing you in person and having read you in very different forms, there's one thing that is consistent in all of those things: the way you are in person and the way you are on the page. There's a lot of crossover, and you're able to be funny and human, but also just a fine-tuned attention to detail that I think is what heightens the humor and heightens the humanity of your pieces. Just mull on that for a bit. Nida, tell us about your process.
Well, my process to finding my voice was, I think it's really, as you were saying it, that, you know, I'm writing this film, and the first draft I wrote of it 10 years ago, when I had no idea who I was or what I had to say. But, you know, when I rewrite it now, it's really cute. I mean, it's not to like shit on my younger self, but like, I was reaching for things, and it was trying, you know, and it feels quite cool to have gained that experience through working on other people's shows, directing other things, learning what I can do well, what I can't do very well, learning from other directors and writers who I've worked with, you know, writing things that don't feel very me. And then when I go back, I'm like, oh, why was I trying to not be me? I was trying to be something that I thought people would want. And so it's really interesting to reflect now on a sort of early work and reshape it to kind of, I want it to like live up. It's weird. It's almost like I'm writing it with my younger self. It's like a kind of co-written thing. And it's really interesting of like how certain things I want to protect, because it had a rawness and a truth and a sort of like franticness to it that I quite like. But then it's just sort of putting it within all the sort of tools that I've learned to make a piece of work that can actually not freak an audience out completely. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I suppose it's almost like, yeah, through, you know, I wrote a trial script for EastEnders because I was trying to get credits early on, and they really liked it, but they're like, it doesn't sound like EastEnders. I was like, oh, okay. You know, and then you just knowing what I couldn't do and what I could do really just helped me lean into, yeah, where what I enjoy, and also where I live. God, that doesn't make any sense. But you know what I mean, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I'd love to see a Nida Manzoor EastEnders episode.
I didn't capture Dot Cotton's voice. She doesn't say motherfucker that much, apparently. Sorry.
You're not my mother. No, she's not her mother. That was me attempting to do a Lady Part song. I'm sorry. Again, I feel like this is such like me just chatting to my friends vibes. I forget that there are people watching. Nikita, please rescue me from this hole I've dug myself into.
Oh, usually I'm the one who needs rescuing. So, I think it's really funny because my process recently seems to be, I'm on deadline, panic and cry. But you know, you can't really, that's not a very, very conducive process. But what I think for me has really helped me evolve my voice is that I cannot write the same book twice, or even write about the same subject over and over again, which is why each book has been quite different. I like experimenting, which is why I tried a novel in verse last, which is why I'm writing a graphic novel now. I never ever really wanted to just be someone who did one thing, because there's so many ways to tell a story, right? That I found that if I just told a story one way, that it would like kind of put me. So just being a poet I've always found it really hard to reconcile the idea of just being called a poet, because I like the idea of being called a poet and a writer, because writer basically do many, many things with. I really like writing plays, I discovered last year. And then I discovered I really like writing and illustrating this graphic novel. And then I realized that I really like illustrating my own books. So it's been like this constant thing of, like Nida said, like it's about learning, and like part of it is so humbling, because you do, along the way you do realize that actually, you know what, I'm really shit at writing short stories. I don't know how to do them. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. And then you kind of go, okay, where can I go and learn those things from, and you do like the short courses, or you just read a lot and you learn how to do those things that you're not so good at. But it is a constant humbling and a constant learning. Like there's no point, I think, in the last 12, 20 years where I felt I know everything I need to know about this. In fact, the more I learn, the more I feel like I don't know anything. So
yeah, but I think that you've kind of all identified a thing there, which is sort of like we're all doing this stuff without necessarily people who came before us showing us the way it was done. Like I don't necessarily think any of us have done like expensive creative writing courses or anything like that. So we've all kind of had to learn and unlearn and relearn and try different things. And also, like, the other thing of like being quite lonely in these industries for reasons I promised I wasn't going to talk about diversity and inclusion in this seminar, because we all know this isn't the audience for it. But there is a degree of imposterness that kind of comes into that, and thank you all for like being really honest about that, because I think it's important to know that we all do feel this at like pretty much all stages of our career, and it is a thing that never goes away, but it's a thing that you can kind of learn to manage better. Coco, did you want to come in on this?
On the process question.
Yes.
Basically, I think I stand by my original statement that I don't have one. Not in that kind of classic like article in the Sunday Times where we're like, I wake up at 8, I do some yoga, then I write, definitely nothing like that. I wake up at 11 and I'm late, and that's what, you're frantic. But having heard the other two, I also share that part of the process, which is just trying out loads of different bits. Obviously in the world of journalism, you're often on commission, so you don't really get those times to experiment. But there is also something to be said about like just hours. I know famously Malcolm Gladwell said 12,000. What did he say? 10,000? How many hours? Lots of hours. You do enough hours, you're an expert. 10,000 hours. I think we've all done 10,000 hours. I think we do 10,000 hours every couple of months, maybe. So I think that part of the process, which is just production, I share that as well.
But you raise an interesting point, I think, which is that to have a process in that way that a lot of writers who came before us perhaps have had and talked about ad nauseum in the Paris Review, or like a Life in the Day feature in the Sunday Times, is like that level of process is probably a privilege, right? Because for the longest time we've had to manage all of this stuff as in addition to everything else that we're doing, or having a full-time job, or then it becomes your job, and actually sometimes the process is just, I just need to get it done, otherwise it doesn't get done, and however it gets done is however it gets done. Is that fair? I don't know. Great, we've solved everything. Before I throw it out to questions, because we've had a couple of questions in the comments that I wanted to come to, I wondered if there has ever been a really good piece of advice that you've been given by someone else, or you've read, or you've come across, or like an editor, or someone that you've worked with, or anywhere, that has really affected how you approach things. I will let whoever's got one that's immediately sprung to mind go first, because I can see your faces going, no one has told me anything sensible ever. Nikita, you put your hand up. Take it away, please.
It's a really funny one, because I actually read it in a Mads Mikkelsen interview. I think he's great, but like what he basically said was, treat every single project you do, no matter how teeny tiny it is or how big it is, as the most important thing you will ever do in your entire life ever. And I thought that was such a great piece of advice, because after I started looking at my work that way, I could see the change in my process, and the way that I kind of began to approach my work really changed. And it could be something as small as like a 4-line kind of, poem that I wrote and then I kind of end up rewriting, or it could be a really big project. I always treat it as the most important thing that I will ever do. And it really does change. So I thought that was a great piece of advice to apply anywhere. So
thanks. That is very, very good. I should apply that to brushing my teeth, because sometimes I'm just like, I just need to get on with my day. Nida, did you have one?
I'm sure that there's been better advice that I've been given, but I can't think of it. One thing that I was sort of getting into as I was making Lady Parts, which is kind of different to what Nikita said, but I think it was just because what I needed at the time was, I was just reading a lot of existentialists, and I was like, we're going to be dead soon. Nothing matters. And that actually really helps me chill out. It's like, what you're doing, it doesn't matter, because, as we talked about, sometimes we feel that like absurd, like intense pressure or weight of importance, and And I sometimes find that for me as a writer can like just stop me writing completely dead. Like if I feel the weight of representation, or if I feel the weight of getting, it just kills the creative fire or whatever. So sometimes I just need to remind myself that, you know, this isn't going to last. It's going to be, you know, it just somehow to help diffuse the importance, even though I do believe, of course, representation is important. We need to get that right. But like, just to help myself breathe in those moments sometimes, and like, yeah, chill, man. That's
that's really funny. Just before lockdown, I did, and I taught an Arvon course with an amazing poet called Caroline Bird. And it was with a bunch of school kids. And, you know, we sat in on each other's workshops because sometimes it's good to like just see how other people run workshops and see if you can pick up tips. And Caroline just had this amazing way where like when the kids were like rustling about or taking a while to get settled, she'd suddenly go, quick, we're all going to be dead soon, come on, we're all going to be dead soon. And then everyone would just suddenly stop and focus, and I was like, yeah,
that's amazing,
Caroline, we're all going to be dead soon, we better write these damn poems. Coco, is there a piece of advice that has really struck you over the years?
So, I mean, I have similar to Nida. Like, I was trying to think of someone that was like really profound that I could assign a quote that sounded like, because people have talked about it in various ways, and the only one I could think of was dance like no one's watching, but like, you know, write like no one's reading. Like write what you want to read. Forget about all the haters that are going to read it and be like, well, I didn't really like that. I didn't like that character. I didn't like whatever. Just whatever. Just sack them all off. Right, like you want to do it. And I've tried to think of someone that was really deep that said something like that. Something in Moby Dick, but unfortunately, I just got those Instagram cushion quotes. That's what I got. Yeah, dance like no one's watching.
That is a good point. Matthew Salasas, who's a creative writing teacher, he wrote this amazing, really like radical book about how to teach creative writing. And he talks a lot about the intended reader and defining who your intended reader is, because his thing is like, if you don't define your reader, the machine will define, or your viewer, the machine of the business end, the capitalism end, will define it as like some sort of mythical default that doesn't exist. And so if you're like, this book is for, and you know, you break that down as much as it's helpful to you to write the thing that you need to write. Well, I really like that idea of the intended reader, because it helps you to kind of sort of set your intentions and write like no one's reading, or dance like no one's watching.
That's good. That's really good.
I definitely dance like everyone's watching. I dance very self-consciously. I can't wait to like the first rave that I go to. I'm just going to lose my mind, I think.
When you said I dance like everyone's watching, honestly, in my mind, I thought you were going to say I dance very sexily. That's what like, oh, yeah. I put on a show.
Oh my god. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions. We've got 7 minutes left, and then I'm going on holiday, so I want to finish on time. We've got a couple of questions in the chat that I just wanted to draw our attention to. Deepika asks, hi everyone, I would like to know what your creative sorry, Deepika, I'm just laughing because you used the word process and we spent half of the panel making fun of the word. I'm really sorry. When do you write? She's asked for practical process. So when do you write, and what is your process from idea to final draft? Who should we start with? Coco, I guess given that this is like so much of your week, right, is like assignment file. Like, can you talk us through that?
First of all, I don't know who did this graphic, but I loved it. I think that's really cool. Yeah. I've never done a virtual Zoom where there's graphics like that.
Didn't you feel like you were on daytime TV for a second?
That was amazing.
Yeah.
That was actually amazing. Whoever did that, thank you. That was great. So where and when, I think, are actually really, really good questions. And going back to that idea of, you know, how you write changing, I have noticed about myself that I used to be someone who wrote in the evening, and now I'm someone who writes in the morning. And I hate so much that I've become that person. And I think all of it is just to do with life. Like, when do you just simply have the most energy? Like, I wake up by the evening nowadays, you know, when I wrote in the evening before, I wasn't working in a newspaper. And so like, yeah, I still had some energy in the evening. And now I'm just like, no, I'm just going to come home and cry myself to sleep. You know, it's just a different headspace. So I think identifying your energy levels when you have the most mental clarity are really important, and they will just be for whatever your lifestyle is saying. The location of you do it. I recently moved flat, and in the lockdown, when it first happened, I didn't have any kind of space. So I was writing at my kitchen table, written some great stuff on my kitchen table. But now that I have a designated office, got to say, lads, it's nice. If you can, you don't even need a designated office, but just get a desk. God's sake, get a desk. Not the diet, it's too low. That's my practical tips. Find out when your energy is, get a desk. Thank you.
Those are great. No, those are great tips. Because especially people who moved home, like, or moved from an office to their home space during lockdown, that separation between the rest of your life and your work life, it just becomes weird. Like, if this is where I sit to eat and talk to my friends and do work meetings and write stuff, it just doesn't work, right?
And also, just like, you know, I'm all team suffer for your art, but not osteoporosis or whatever, not like backache. We'll suffer in other ways. We'll suffer with the burden of representation. We'll suffer with alienation from people that feel they've been, not my back though, leave my back alone. Also, you know what I mean? Lost the future.
Nikita's so outraged. She's like, I want my backache is my pain, my professors. Yeah. Nida.
Yeah. I actually currently write from my kitchen table. I mean, but that's
if you take one thing away from this, get a desk.
I know. I'm hopefully, you know, I just need more of a bigger flat, but it's gonna happen. I aspire to an office. Like, sometimes I dream of it. But I actually sometimes write from a cafe now that things are open. If it's like, there's one, like a really quiet one around the corner, I can kind of get quiet. Sometimes people doing stuff around me helps me kind of focus. So sometimes I do that, but I'm sort of one of the people, I can pretty much write anywhere. I'm one of those annoying, it's like, you know, people who can sleep anywhere. I hate those, but I'm like that with writing. I could be like anywhere, just in the corner, and I could kind of just get in the zone. I think that's because I made a conscious choice not to be like, oh, I need the temperature just so and this lighting this way for me to write, because I feel like that just psychs you out when you're like, can do it anywhere. When you like just decide that, then you actually, I feel like you kind of can. But yeah.
Hey.
Hello. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, I really miss my co-working space. I was lucky enough to have a desk at a co-working space in Bristol where I live, and it's so nice to like in an office, like, or just in that sort of environment, just watch other people, because being in the presence of other people's foibles and habits and the way they carry themselves through the world, it just sort of ends up in your work. And it's
do you not ever feel, because sometimes I tried that thing where me and some mates, we like in the beginning of the lockdown didn't have great, you know, office scenarios at home, so we went and did the hot desk thing, and like, I don't know how to explain it, but like, oh, I can't find the words, I'm stuck for a word, and they're there like almost like licking their lips, like, typing. They might as well be like, yummy, I'm having such a great time writing. I couldn't bear it. It was awful, insufferable. Did you not find that in your co-working space, like when you're a bit sort of stuck in your own head and everyone's having, you know, the best time? Is that not? No.
No. I was that guy. I was the guy that you were cutting eyes at, probably.
Okay, remind me to never work in the same room as you ever.
Yeah, sorry. I did discover, sorry, we'll come to you in a second, Nikita, but I did discover a thing that if any writers are watching, there's the London Writers Salon run this thing called the Writers Hour every morning from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. where they just turn on a Zoom, and you and 600 people just get on a Zoom and write on mute. And when I was first told about it by my students, I was a bit like, that sounds weird. And then I did one, and it was so addictive and brilliant. I loved it because I just suddenly felt like I was surrounded by people, and it just felt like solidarity, like we're all, me and my mates, me and other people at the library. But then 8 a.m. was a bit annoying, so I set my own one up with people I actually like. Or no, that's rude if people who went to that watch it, people I knew and like, is what I mean. And it's been like the best thing, because now I have like a crew of writers, and we just every morning we write for an hour and then we say goodbye and go, and I feel like I've interacted with people. Tick. Nikita, tell us about your process, and then we will finish up and let everyone get on with their days.
Oh, I do think like there really is something, and I missed a lot of that conversation because I just dropped out for some reason. But I really do appreciate the idea of like sitting in a room, like having a room of one's own, very much as Virginia Woolf said. But I really love having my own office. I've only had one for the last 6 months, and I think it's the best thing that I've ever done for my creative brain, because so many ideas have been born just of sitting in this room and going, what if I just did this? You can't do that. Yes, you can. So, having that conversation and like no one there to kind of go, are you okay? Because you sound like you're talking to yourself again. And I'm like, yes, that's a lot. That's my process. It's like I sit and I talk to myself and I tell myself I could just do these weird things. And then I try to talk myself out of them. And then I just do the weird things. So I hope that helps.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you for giving up your time to do this panel, and I hope for those of you who are watching that it was fun and useful. Yes, thank you. Like, okay, so look, people watching, I have had the absolute privilege over the course of my career to work with these three amazing writers at some point or other, and it's just changed my life and made me a better person and a better writer. So you need to go and just engage with their work. Nikita Gill's novel in verse, The Girl and the Goddess, is out now. Go and buy it. Coco Khan writes 2 columns for The Guardian every week, and you should read them and shout about them on the internet and send them around to all of your people. Also, buy The Good Immigrant if you haven't bought that, because she's got an essay in it, and it's not about the burqa as well. And what was the book you wrote? Just wrote an intro to a book that came out.
Yeah, it's called Aidan Shaw's Penis.
That's the one. I can't remember.
That's what it's called. Yeah.
That's the title I forgot. I can't believe that's the title I forgot.
I love it.
And Nida Manzoor wrote and directed and created We Are Lady Parts, which is currently streaming all on all. Is it? It's not even called All 4 anymore, is it? It's just Channel 4 on 9. Just Channel 4. I don't know. We Are Lady Parts is on Channel 4. Go and watch it. It's hilarious. And Anjana, who plays one of the main characters, is just one of the funniest people. That cast is amazing. That cast is so amazing. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. Thank you to South Asian Heritage Month for giving us this space. And thank you to you guys for giving up your lunches. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, Nikesh.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Nikesh. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.